Greetings, fellow citizens. Welcome to the next episode of 10 for the Developers. I'm Elwin Batchelor Jr., lead vehicle artist in LA, and I'm here with
Associate Technical Artist, Patrick Salerno.
And we'd like to thank all of the subscribers for making this show happen. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to put this operation together, and you guys really help us develop the game. So, Patrick, I have a question for you. It's from Earthfire. And it says, what aspects of the development process do you enjoy or perhaps find difficult but rewarding?
What aspects in particular? Well, I like the challenge mainly. You come in every day and it's a different type of puzzle to solve. You constantly learn new things and there's new tasks. I mean, to be specific, lately I've been learning how to put ships together and then tear them apart again. And you know, that's cool to me. You go in, you see the model, you see how it's put together, you yank out the pieces, put them in the XML, and then you go in the engine, you shoot it. Then it blows apart. And there's explosions everywhere.
Yeah, so you like, your favorite part is breaking all of the hard work that me and my team do, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Well, for me, the most rewarding part for me is just when the whole thing comes together and you finally get to climb into your ship, turn everything on, take off, and fly. Ultimately, I mean, obviously, I enjoy doing all the artwork for it and the struggles that you have to go through to make that happen. But when you actually get to play the asset and everything works the way it's supposed to, that's the most gratifying moment for me. Because ultimately, I want an awesome game.
Right. This is from Cold Gas. He says, "Hi, Elwin. Hi, Patrick. What have you been working on the past few days, and any details you can tell us about?"
Yeah, very easy. The last couple of days, I've very specifically been working on the beginning stages of development for the Caterpillar. So that means doing some white box work. That means taking some concept work and bashing it in to make sure it all conforms with the gameplay. It also means starting to do some work and research on how materials work. So specifically, we're putting a lot of effort into developing how the paint wears on the metal inside the Drake ships because they have a very different style than Aegis, for example. Yeah. So that's what I've been up to.
Okay. For me in particular, I've kind of been transitioning from optimization to helping create these, they're called ship setup levels, and it's where you kind of bring all the pieces together. In terms of optimization, I've been finishing up just a level of detail pass on all of the flyable ships in the game to get a little bit more performance out of them. Did a segment recently on that, goes into more detail, but yeah, so putting all the pieces together, trying to make the workflow in the pipeline a bit easier for other artists. Just go in, check out the ship, shoot it, look at it in different lighting conditions, look at all the lights, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool. So Belzoth wants to know, can you define what a successful ship is to you?
To me in particular, to me a successful ship is one that has made it through the entire pipeline in an efficient manner. What that means in particular is going through all of the different phases of development, from concept to actual modeling, texturing, lighting, the whole destruction system, and just making it into the engine and performing optimally. To me, that's a successful ship. That means that it went through, who knows how many hands, and then ended up, boom, in the game, going, ready to go. You don't have to go back and fix things that are too broken. That's a successful ship to me.
Right. I mean, I can agree with that to some degree. I know you're really focused on the development part of it, but I think to me a successful ship really is a ship that when I first show it to someone, they're like, holy, I want to fly that thing right now. That's basically a successful ship. And I hope we can develop a lot of those.
Yeah, definitely. Got a couple questions that I decided to take on, so I'll answer these. This one is from Daz. He says, when optimizing, are you aiming for a specific number of assets or triangles on the screen at any given time? It's kind of a multi-part question, and kind of related to that, I'll just kind of answer it all at once. But he says, with backers keen on getting some big space battles, how do you determine what's possible and what ship count to set? And, how do we work on a bunch of things, a lot of ships in a close area, and a lot of stuff going on? It's kind of a large question. There's a lot of variables that come into it, but really, Really, every ship is a bit different. Every ship is its own puzzle you need to solve. And your general goal is to get them down to roughly the same level. So what I mean by that is, at least just in terms of level of detail, when the model kind of slowly disappears, we'll focus on that. That's very important. That saves a lot of performance. When you're up close to someone, you see the ship, it has all of its internal stuff, all of its external stuff, all that full detail stuff, right? But when you're far away, you may not realize, but you're not actually rendering all that stuff. Like things get cold, the interior might disappear, the model might degrade in quality a bit, not noticeable. That's kind of where it comes down to. Things like that are where we come in and we sort of look at the statistics and we say, how is this performing? How many ships can we have in an area? You know, how much detail can we get at various ranges? And then we just optimize from there. So, I mean, for a specific number, really there's no specific number of assets or like, you know, it's just more whatever people's computers can really handle based on, you know, what we use to work with.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of having this game run on a PC is that the more power you have, the more of the beautiful visuals you can have running at the same time.
Yes.
So part of it is hardware related, but obviously we're trying to optimize as much as possible to make the game run as smooth as possible for as many people as possible.
Yes, exactly.
Next question comes from Far Assault. I don't know why I had trouble reading that. He says, "Hi folks, has there been a particular time when you have had to make a decision to not implement the most realistic version of a part due to technical/design limitations? If yes, why?" Interesting. So I spent a lot of time working on the Merlin, and I made that thing so that you'd be able to open up every single compartment to access every single component. But for technical reasons, I basically had to rip all that stuff out at the last minute and cap the holes to get the ship to run because it was pulling way too many draw calls. So that's one example of many that we've had in the game. But the process of developing a game often tends to be trying to go as far as you can with a specific type of idea and developing it as far as you can, and then realizing, oh man, you know, this isn't gonna work, so how do we solve this problem with less resources? So that's just kind of the theme, you know, for game development in general, and that's what happened with the Merlin. It made me sad because it looked really awesome when you pressed the play button and everything just popped open.
Saw it, it was so cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. So maybe we can get that back into the game at some point in the future, but at the moment, that was one example of what we had to tear out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So the next question comes from Amontillado. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he asks you, Patrick, specifically, how closely does LOD work tie into manufacturer style guides?
Well, actually, not really much at all. The concept for the ship and the main base ship and everything that makes it up is based on the manufacturer style guides. LODs are based on the actual geometry for the ship itself and the best way to optimize that down to a level where we can include it with all the other ships and maintain high performance. So LODs really aren't based on style guides. I mean, you might try and you obviously want to keep the silhouette of the ship and keep it looking like, you don't want to just look blocky. So if like a ship has these nice curves along the edges, you don't want the LODs to just sort of block them out or chop them up, you know, you want it to maintain that shape. So
right. I mean, what that does mean though is that for LODs there are some ship styles that are more difficult to deal with because of that. So a very blocky ship, you know, generally speaking, a very blocky ship, it would be easier to LOD. Because you wouldn't notice the changes in the surfaces as much as you would as a ship that's a little bit more rounded.
Right.
So yeah,
okay.
Style guides don't affect it, but the style guide does indirectly affect the LOD, how hard it is to make the LOD for it.
Correct. From Wolf Frocken. Hey Elwin, it was mentioned by Lando recently that the Caterpillar will be somewhat of a benchmark for draped ships as far as design and looks go. From your perspective, could you expand on that more, and how will it affect the Buccaneer, Dragonfly, Herald, and Cutlass? Also, how could you see the designs changing based on what you've done with the Caterpillar? I know it's hard to live up to everyone's expectations. Without teasing too much, how excited should we be about what is coming to the rest of the Drake line?
You should be very excited for what's coming for the rest of the Drake line. And it is incredibly hard to live up to any expectations for the quality bar of these ships.
Yes.
But it is true that the Caterpillar is going to be sort of the first, I guess, the flagship ship for Drake. I know we have the Cutlass already out there, and that one was developed with techniques that we've improved on since they were created. So we will have to go back and sort of, upgrade those to the quality of the new ships. So we're trying to hit the bar of essentially what the Retaliator is, right? So the Retaliator has the latest and greatest technology built into it. And I think the Gladius does as well, and the Gladiator might have most of that in there. So we have a lot of ships that are already starting to sort of set an example for the kind of quality bar that we want to go for, and also the techniques that we're using for various reasons: damage, variety, making sure that we keep our texture resolution high enough requires us to build the ships in a certain specific way. So ships like the Cutlass were not developed that way.
Correct.
And so it will have to get an upgrade. Now the Caterpillar is sort of the ship that we're pushing forward to define the look of what Drake is. And so when we're done with that one, we will end up having to basically reuse some of the textures that we've developed for it, some of the shape language, maybe even some assets, whatever makes it easier for us to develop the future ships, and then apply that to the Cutlass, do the same thing with the Heralds, do the same thing with the Dragonfly and the Buccaneer. Okay, I wasn't sure those names were public. So you should expect that the lineup for Drake will look like a family of ships, right? So if I look at a Dragonfly, I should immediately say, hey, that's a Drake ship for this and that reason. So we're definitely trying to unify the looks, which is something that we've been working on. All of the manufacturers, you should be able to see this now between the Starfarer and the Freelancer. The UK team did a really great job unifying those two ships. They look like they're exactly from the same family. The Reliant also, because it used a lot of assets that were developed in the UK. So we're trying to do the same thing with Drake, and the Caterpillar is the first one online.
Yep. And as Elvin was saying, as we build more ships based on our style guides, you'll see a more cohesive look come together, because the more pieces you have from things you already made, you end up getting a giant library based on these pieces and the design aesthetic. So it's easier for existing artists, new artists to just come in, pick up, go, oh, that's what that manufacturer looks like based on existing ships. Versus the hardest part is coming up with it. You've got all these different manufacturers. Each one needs to have a unique aesthetic, and just gotta hold it.
Yep. Cool. Next question comes from Cav Guy. One of the fascinating things for me watching you guys build Star Citizen is how you pull it all together. Can you talk through the changes to the ship pipeline over the last year and how it's reduced the time it takes to get a ship from concept to flight? Also, do you think there's still room for improvement?
Definitely. I think you might actually be a bit better answering this question per se, but from what I've seen from the ship pipeline as a whole, from concept to tech design to implementation, we've definitely made progress because we're working more closely with our other studios. We do a lot of the tech and the design and help with the engineering, and it's all just sort of coming together, and you're seeing things, higher quality, more complicated assets coming out quicker, right, versus concepting it, building the tech, putting the tech into practice, experimenting on it, breaking it, fixing it, rebuilding it, right? The pipeline is coming together, which means assets are getting pushed out faster.
Yeah, absolutely. To speak specifically about what some of the changes have been to the pipeline, specifically in developing the ships, we've moved slightly away from a paradigm where we had concept fully developed for a ship before production started going into work for it. So now what we're doing is we're spending a lot of time up front working with game design to make sure that all of the mechanics that the ship needs to comply with, or the space that's required for the player to walk around in if it has an interior area, is all blocked out ahead of time before we even give that to the concept artist, to make sure that when the concept artist does his work, it all fits with the game rules, and we don't have to worry about having to too drastically changing the concept that's already been developed. Changes will always happen, but doing it this way allows us to catch any problems really early on before anybody spends weeks or months of their life developing an asset that then has to be reworked in the future. So for the Carrack specifically, we have plans to build that soonish. That's the best I can say about that. But right now, Anvil is one of those manufacturers that still needs to have its library filled out. So Aegis, for example, because of the Retaliator and some of the other ships in their line, they have quite a bit of content to draw from to develop the newer ships a bit faster. With Anvil, we're not quite at that point yet. And so when we get there, we will be able to hit our stride and be able to develop ships faster. What will most likely happen is that the Carrack will probably help develop that library for us, because it will be the first large multi-crew Anvil ship that we probably work on. And so that's how we'll develop our assets to then, in the future, be able to build ships even quicker.
So I'll read the next one from Johan26. It's kind of two separate questions here. It says, on the development side, are there many manufactured hull pieces that are shared across ships of a single company? Like, hatches, thrusters, seats, doors, panels, etc.
Yes.
All right, answer that one. Awesome. On the game side, visually speaking, how customizable are the ships in general? He's like, I know the possibility to change the seats, but could we expect some more customizations like interior paint, switching, fancier escape pods, beds, whole dashboard, more powerful headlights, better kitchen, etc.?
I think it's a tentative yes to that second part. Just to hit on the whole manufacturers sharing assets, that's absolutely a yes. It's almost it's absolutely necessary that we do something like that in order to develop the number of ships that we have to make. So what that means is that we will have escape pods that are common to Aegis, for example, and you should expect to see those escape pods in other Aegis ships. Docking collars, same thing. So you may even see chairs that are shared among the same manufacturer. So right now you will notice that on the Freelancer, you've got a specific type of chair, which also exists on the Starfarer, which a very close version of that also exists on the Reliant. And there's a couple of reasons for doing that. One, it keeps the look and feel the same, so you can identify what manufacturer built your ship. Two, we can actually build the ship much faster, right? So sharing of assets within manufacturers is absolutely something we have to do. In terms of customization, we are still working on what the full range of customization is. The most obvious and sort of start of the customization process that we really want to hit is allowing people to change the paint jobs on their ships. And we're exploring a couple of different ways of doing this. We haven't quite implemented a full working version of it yet, but it's something that we are building our current ships to support.
Yep, no, definitely. Just on Owen's note, part of the development process is making something, trying out different techniques for it, and finding out whether it works. So we do a lot of R&D into different ways to do it, and some methods make the cut and some don't. We used to have a paint system that was a bit harder to work with. Like we had paints, we had it working, and it's just it's a juggle. You say, does this help the pipeline? Is there another way we can do this faster? That constant iteration is kind of why we like working here as well. Is just like you can make changes to things and find a better way to do it, and you're not just stuck somewhere. You may have to go back and do changes to older stuff occasionally, but in the grand scheme of things, it's going to help the entire pipeline. So we're making everything basically as modular as possible, right, within nonsensical terms. So you should be able to go out and get other parts. So definitely modularity is something we already have and we can expand upon. We just have to make sure that it's a good use of time management and et cetera, et cetera.
Right. And just to touch on what you mentioned of us previously having a paint system, that paint system was harder to work with, but it also it created a conflict with the way we wanted to do damage, just because of the specific implementation method. And as a result of that, we went in favor of the damage to find a different way of doing the customization on the paint.
The damage is so much cooler.
Well, yes, it is.
Metal melting away and everything, so instead of saving, basically the way it works is you have UV maps, if anyone knows what those are. It's where the textures get painted onto. And the way the tech works is the damage shader kind of, it works over the UV maps, but you also needed the paints in the UV too. So they were kind of sharing the same space, right? So we're like, well, what do we pick, And then we're like, well, the paints can probably be done another way and more efficiently, and this is just the best way for the damage system to work. So that's how our opportunity costs work.
That also kind of touches back in the what features have we decided not to implement. That is one of them. So we're working on a much better way of allowing customization, which the goal is to let people not only change at least several different colors on their ship, but also attempt to allow them to pick, decals for their wings or whatever. That way they have like a massive happy face or whatever they want to put on it. So we have some prototypes of that working, and I think it's going to be pretty cool, but more work has to go into it.
Okay.
So the last question comes from Eschatos?
Eschatos? Okay.
Eschatos.
There we go.
I have a multi-part question about damage states. So I'm just going to skip straight to the question.
Sure.
When you're designing for this, is the final damage state of the ship intended to reflect specific damage? For example, is the tail/cargo section being destroyed because it is where it was hit?
Yes. That is pretty much exactly how it works. What we're doing on the tech design side, and it's going to get more in depth than this as we go too, but you hit a specific location, damage can transfer from that location to another location. There's probabilities, so like if you hit like a wing and there's components under there, like a shield generator or something, that could be damaged, and that creates like a rippling explosion that goes and blows up something else. Which so like we're trying to create a very dynamic damage system. So yes, at a base level, things break off. Wings snap off. Tails snap off, body snaps in half. The three main parts, well, 3 or 4 is like nose, neck, body, tail, right? So when your ship is finally 100% destroyed, if your neck is destroyed, you're just boom, you just kind of blow up. But if your tail broke off, you might still, airlock, thunk, and try and coast back to it. It depends on how it's going. If you have like a critical series of events that happen, that might destroy your whole ship.
Yeah, I mean, if you trigger catastrophic damage, it's game over.
Yeah, it's game over. Your whole ship's going to blow up. So at the end, yes, there should be, areas that you can see, especially like in non-100% destroyed state. You should be able to see exactly where you got hit during your fight. But at the end, when your ship is blown up, well, you got shot in the wing, but it's missing, right? You got shot in the tail. And at 100%, it is a complete model swap into sort of the husk chunks at the moment with like an overlay PFX that bursts out. It's all blended together, so you can't really tell. But unless you're, going back for repairs, you don't really need to see that one area where you got shot in the wing. It's all about performance. How can we keep realistic yet persistent damage?
Yes.
So.
Yep. The next part of his question is the intention that we'll be able to survive something like that if we're not in the damaged section of the ship, if we have a spacesuit on? I think you kind of touched upon that.
I did kind of touch upon that. Yes, it is in the design board. Right now, you kind of just, you blow up and die. Your spaceship's blown up, right? As the damage and how it transfers gets more in depth, we can end up just probably saying, airlock door closed, you're all safe. I don't know. Honestly, I don't really have 100% specifics on that, but I do know conceptually it should be possible, and that's kind of what we're leaning towards, because that's realistic, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's ultimately the goal.
Yeah.
Obviously, game design is still working on the specifics of how that functions, because as for example, if the back of your ship gets blown off and that's where all your power plants are, and you're stuck in the front, but you've got no power, does that mean you are basically stuck in a floating husk? Right. So there's more than just the realistic aspect of the game. We have to worry about what the implications for the gameplay are as well. Okay, so the last part of Eschato's question is, and thirdly, do you have to consider the repair mechanic when designing damage states? Yes,
you do, because you have to think of what's going to need to be repaired, what's going to be left behind. Even if the mechanic isn't like fully implemented, you should still think how is the player going to repair this? What should the player see? What tools are as disposable? Like it's a big difference. Like just think conceptually. Okay, like this isn't how it is or anything. But if you have a spaceship and it just flies into a hangar and a bunch of like nanobots repaired or something, that's one way where you don't have to be too interactive. But if you're like a dude with like a blowtorch and you're up there, the ship is in a completely different spot. You're getting a completely different visual. All sorts of stuff is still going on.
Yeah, and that repair mechanic is still being fleshed out.
Correct.
And I think it's going to be really cool. It's a lot more dynamic than what we had before, but it's important to keep in mind that our damage system currently is not what we started with. So we use the term damage states, but it doesn't actually reflect what it is anymore, right? It's a lot more organic than that. So previously we did have something called damage states, where you would shoot the wing and there would be 4 different versions of the wing in different states of damage.
25, 50, 75, and 100.
Exactly. That's gone. Right, so the way we're doing it now is we're actually building the internal supports for that wing and when we shoot the hull surface, it'll blow a hole through it to reveal the interior. So there's no damaged state, it just is how much damage has that part taken.
Correct, and the only damaged state is really the 100% at this point. Are you destroyed or not, right? And that's
Right.
when you get the detach command, and then boom, the wing or the tail goes flying off. But until
Right.
then, it's mainly just the shader doing the work, and it's hitting, and it's rippling out, and it's tearing apart, and then it's transparent. Then you can see the metal ribbing of the inside of the ship, and then that shows a more visual version of the wear. And then so it's less memory because you don't have 4 different models per separate part of the ship anymore that just has to do with damage.
Right.
And it creates a better visual due to the way the shader works.
Yeah.
So we're working on the pipeline all the time, optimizing the tech, coming up with new tech, implementing that, and so far it's looking really cool.
Yeah, it's very awesome. And it's also a lot more satisfying to see the damage happen where you shoot.
Yes.
Whereas previously that wasn't the case. You could shoot the tip and then the base of the piece would start to break off. So thanks for joining us on this episode of 10 for the Developers. I'm Elwin Batchelor Jr., lead vehicle artist in LA with
Patrick Salerno, socio-technical artist.
And thanks again to all the subscribers for making this show happen. You guys rock.
Take care.
Hey guys, thanks for watching 10 for the Chairman. If you guys would like to see more episodes, go here. If you guys would like to subscribe to our YouTube channel and always keep up to date with all our video content, go here. And if you guys would like to watch episodes of Around the Verse, go here please. And I will see you in the verse.